boat building project is complete without the picture of the sailing ship. It has migrated up here from the canoe shop in the basement and moved all the tools and tables and most of what I got. Got a new saw. That's pretty good. I am now starting to work on the Haven 12 and a half. Bought this book by Maynard Bray. I've got bad glare there. And that tells you how to do it. And these are all the plans for the frames. It says no lofting required. And so what I'm doing is I'm using these lines on here, this big easel paper that I bought at Home or Office Depot, which is 22, no, I don't know how big it is. Yeah, it's got to be about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. Anyway, so then I got carbon paper, which I didn't even know you could find anymore. Carbon paper, and I get a sheet of paper out, put the carbon paper down, put it underneath whichever individual frame I'm working on. So, for example, this first line down here, that's frame 1. So you just take and draw it out on the paper, carbon copy it onto the paper, then cut it out. I have one here that I'm working on where I cut out the piece of paper. Now this is for the upper side of frame 4. And so I transferred the carbon paper lines and I just cut it out with the scissors, and then it gives me this basically copy of the mold. This paper down here on the bottom is just excess. Then I take this, hold it down on the stock that I'm using for the mold, and transfer the lines off onto the stock, which this is 1x6 pine. Now when I do this, I'm going to double this up. So I'm going to get another piece just like this and line it up with it and put the other piece underneath it so it's double thickness. Use a couple of screws so it holds steady, and then I'll take it to the bandsaw and we'll just saw it out. Now you can see here that I have a 3 frames so far that I've already done, and since you have the wood doubled up when you're sawing it, you get exact symmetrical sides. So once those are done, then you can put your gussets on there to hold them together, and I'm just using little scraps of plywood or whatever I can find. The cross members down at the bottom of these frames are marked so that they are on the shear line. So in other words, that bottom piece that's holding the 2 frames together, you might be able to see this line down here. That's the shear line. You get the shear line off the plan, and it shows you right where it is. Shear line for number 1. Now, something I ran into is that the first 3 frames came out okay, and they came up along this center line here and took a hard left turn there to make a flat surface. And as you can see, the top of the frame there is flat, just as are frames 2 and 3. And that's where our stem is going to lay on top of those frames once we get the frame stations set up, or the mold stations. Frames would refer to the oak that we'll have to bend around these frames once we get going. So I keep getting the terminology mixed up, but these are actually called molds. Now, what I ran into yesterday is I'm working on frame 4, and when I got up to the center line, which basically is the keel, you're building these upside down, and these lines don't extend all the way over to the center line. And it became rather frustrating because I'm working on number 4 here, and it stopped right about here. You can see this one stops right here, this one stops. They don't come on over to the center line, so I couldn't figure out if they were supposed to do that or not. Anyway, you've got this chart up here that shows you your heights from the construction base, which is that back line at the bottom of the frame, which is the feet, basically, of the molds. And it tells you on there how high these are supposed to be. So from the construction baseline to the keel, for example, that first frame's 21 inches. And it is. It measured out exactly right once I got it done. So from the very top where it's flat all the way down to what will be the floor, well, the floor of the construction base, 21 inches in that case. What I ran into with this on frame 4, not only was that line not extended, but the chart says that frame 4 is supposed to be 34 13/16. When I measure just on the plan from the construction baseline up this center line up to where, if I just extended the line out, which is what I finally did on frame 4, you can see there's a little tiny mark right here that I put down. That is 34 13/16. This line doesn't make it there. So I am somewhat concerned that these stations, or these molds, aren't going to be just exactly right. I'm going to press on and we will adjust them as necessary once we set them up on this platform. The platform here is 2 8-foot sheets, 4x8 sheets of compressed hardboard. I went with that instead of plywood, and I have this all braced up on the garage floor here with a framework of 2x4s underneath there. And you can see I've already got a center line kind of marked out. Alright, that's it for video 1 of the Haven 12.5.